Hello guys and welcome in this new Unity tutorial. Today what I will show you is how to create a Plant vs Zombie game. In this first part of that tutorial I'm gonna show you how to create a card, being able to drag and drop a plant into the field here and doing it properly so that you cannot drop a plant on top of another one. So it's kind of the basic of the UI management here that I will explain to you how to do it. Also, if you want to download those beautiful assets, I will put the link in the description of the pack. So let's jump into it. Alright, so let's jump into the tutorial phase. So I started by adding all the image that I needed. So I have the bullet, I have the card, I have the plant on the field. I also have like the background here, like the field here. You can see all them, and I have a zombie. So the first part of that tutorial will be to being able to drag a card and place it on the field. So we will have plants on the field on specific container. So first, what we need to do is obviously creating the canvas. So inside, if I'm right clicking in the hierarchy here, going to UI and create new canvas. We can also set it to scale with screen size. So 1920 to 1080. Let's put it that way. After that, inside that canvas, what we can do is create an image, which will be our background. So let's call it here background. We can also resize this image with the size of the background here, but first we can assign it to the image field here. I'm gonna resize it with the size that I see here, so 1103 with 477. We'll also resize it with the proper size that the screen have. So let's go with that size here. Maybe a little bit bigger. All right, that should do it. That should do it. So what I can do now is create the card that will be on top. So we're gonna also create a new UI image. We're gonna assign the card that we see here to that image, like that. Also resize it, 611 by 538, and we're gonna need to resize it. Let's put it there for now, so maybe a little bit bigger. Let's see it like that. So for now we won't have resources. We will be able to just drag as many plants as we want into the field. So let's create first a new folder here. We're gonna call it prefab. And let's also create a new folder here that we're gonna call, no, not a script, sorry. Sorry about that. Okay, let's call a new folder here. Folder, we're gonna call it script. So that should do it. So the image here, we're gonna call it object card. And let's just put it at the center of the world and create a prefab with it. So the object card is on top right there. So if we have a new card, we can just swipe the image with a new card and maybe swipe some game object that we're gonna create later on. So on the object card here, what we need to have is a collider to be able to detect the container that we will put on the field. So let's put a box collider but 2D, like that. I need to increase the size a little bit. Let's say that it's gonna be 200 by 300. It's not at the center of the object. That's because the image is not in the center, but that's not a problem. We can offset that right there, maybe with an offset like that of 30. that that should be okay. No, uh, we don't need the box slider on the card. It's on the other prefab that we're gonna create. So sorry, let's create a new image here with the texture of the plant. Let's resize it the right size, 578 by 426. And this is way too big for what we need, so we're gonna size it down to make it fit in one of the square here. So that size should work. So let's put the position at 0, 0. Let's create, and let's call it object, and make it a prefab. So here we can delete that object from the scene and go into the object itself and now create the box slider 2D. So we're gonna need a size, let's say 100 by 200. This is big enough. It's just to detect the square of the field that we're gonna make right now. So another one, UI image. We want to have something a little bit like that, like maybe 80 by 100 is good enough. We can see that it fit the square. It's kind of inside the square, so that's fine for me. We can put the color of it a little bit like this. So when we will mouse over with the card a square like that, we're gonna activate the image. So it's gonna just so we're gonna see which square we are selecting. So that's fine. Maybe a little bit more. So we also need a collision 2D. Let's say maybe 30 by 30. 30 by 40 actually. Something like this. So when the image will cross one container and another, we'll have some gap here to be able to unload the square and load the other one there. You will see that it's better like this than the entire square. And let's set it to trigger. I also forget in the object itself here, we have to set it to trigger, and we also need to add a rigid body 2D, which we need to set to kinematic because it will be moving by the mouse. So if we go back to the square here, let's call it object container. Let's create a prefab with that. So here, the object container. I'm gonna create a new empty game object into the canvas. I'm gonna call it containers, put a child of this game object, and copy and paste it to make one entire line. So those will be the invisible container for the plant that we are having there. So let's do it like this. Now we can copy the entire row like that. Okay, that should do the job. So now if we go to the object container prefab, and we're gonna set off the image here so we don't see anymore the squares. One last thing that we need to add here is a new empty game object. I'm gonna put it on top of the canvas, and we're gonna call it Game Manager. This that will this game object will manage the entire game behind all the other game objects. All right. Now let's start by making the behavior of the card. So the object card. What we need to have here is a new script. So we're gonna create a script. New script. Let's call it object card. Double click on it. So first here we need to add a new script, and why not start a small music at the same time. So it's gonna be funnier. All right. So here we need to add the Unity Engine event system right here in the top of your script. So it's a Unity Engine is the event system. So what we need to have is the I drag handler. And if we right click on that event here, we can create what Unity create basically. Let's okay. So like this it's gonna work. Now what we need to do here is as soon as we are dragging from that place, we need to instantiate the card. So on the card, we're gonna make a public game object, which will be the plant. So let's call it object like dragging object, or just object on the store drag, and another one for object underscore game, because we will have two kind of plant. When we will dragging the card, we're gonna instantiate a new plant, which will be like the plant that when we are dragging with the colliders and everything. And when we will put it on the container, it will be another game object, which will be just the game plant. So let's create that plant also. So prefab, we have the object card, we have the object here, so we can duplicate that one here by just holding control and dragging the mouse over there. This one we call it object drag, and this one will be object inside the game. And since they are plant and it will be always plant, let's say object plant drag and object plant game. So those are like that. So here on the card that we have in the scene, we have those two new variables that we can fill up. So let's go with the drag one and the game one. Into the game one we can remove the rigid body and remove the collider. So for now it will only be that image here. Alright, also what we need to add, I already did it inside the game, but we need to add two new layer. So we go into layer here, add layer, and you can add dragging plant and container. Those layers will detect the object when they will collide with each other. So on the plant that we are dragging, we're gonna have the layer dragging plant, and on the container here we're gonna have the layer container. So the scene is starting to have a great setup. We have all our container, we have our card here. So now when we're dragging the card, we can instantiate the object drag, and we can make it child of the canvas. So here we can have also a public canvas like that, public canvas object, which we can also assign in the scene. So let's say that the canvas is this guy here, and here we can set the canvas transform so that the object will be instantiated into the transform of the canvas, so it will be a child of the canvas. Oh, this is not on drag actually. I messed up something. It's more like on pointer down. So I pointer down handler. And we can also create at the same time high pointer up handler because we will need also this function. So let's right click on it and let Unity create our base function. Same for this one. And the instantiate will be on pointer down. So this is like that. We can also create a variable which will be private, a private game object that will contain the object drag instance, just like that. So here we can assign object drag instance to what we are instantiating here. So at the same time, when we are instantiating the game object, we want to put it at the mouse of our mouse position. So we can just look at the transform position of that game object equal to the input that mouse position. Perfect. And also, while we are dragging, we always want to update the position of the mouse to be the exact same thing as what we have right there. So we want to do that also. So if we are trying it right now, I'm dragging from here. You can see that now we have like, we're dragging the plan from the card. And now if I'm just put my mouse up, you can see that we have an error here because I didn't do anything with that. So let's go stop. Let's delete what we have here. Object drag instance. We can start by destroying that game object when our mouse pointer is up, because we are not assigning it on any container at the moment. So we're just like deleting the plan. So we can just do that at the moment. We have our basic setup there. So now what we need to do is to first create a new game manager script, because we need to know inside the game manager what object we are dragging and if we are over a container. So let's create a new script. Let's call it game manager. And inside the game manager here, we need to have public game object, which we're gonna call dragging object, public game object, current container. You can also have a public static game manager script, because I want to make a singleton with that script, because it's the game manager, so we need to access it with all the other script in the game. So by making it static with the singleton, we will be able to access it. So you will see. Let's call it just instance. If I'm making an awake function like that, we can assign the instance to this. So some script will require to access that game manager, and we won't be able to assign it before because it's a static game object here. So we can see that we have those two game objects here. They are not assigned yet because they will be assigned dynamically when we will drag the object of the card. We will also need to create a function. So public void, let's say, let's call it place object. And that function will require a game object. Oh, not game manager, but game object, which will be the object. And we'll also require to have the container, but actually the current object, yeah, we'll see later on. But I know that I will have to manage that script later on. So now what we can do is work on our container. So in the prefab, we can go in the object container, add a script to that, and call it obviously object container. Alright, so here we can open the object container script. What we need to do here is detect the collision of the card, not the card, but the plant that is going out of the card when we're dragging it. So what we will do here is create a public void on trigger enter 2D. We also need to create a sign bot with exit, so public void on trigger exit 2D. And here let's create a public game object, which will be the no, let's create a public bool to know if it's full. So if the container is full, we won't be able to place another item inside of it. So here that is working fine. Also here we need to, when we're dragging an item, we need to assign it there into the game manager. So object card on drag, on pointer down, on pointer up. Alright, so on pointer down, what we're gonna do here is going to the game manager instance, that dragging object will be equal to our object drag instance. So just to show you what we just done is that inside the game manager here, we see that the dragging object, it says right there, when I'm dragging an object, now we have a reference here into the game manager. We need to also delete that reference when we are destroying that item. So here, before destroying it, I want to do the same here, but make it null. So if I'm doing the same thing here, you can see that now it's null. So we have a reference into the game manager to the dragging object that we have. That means that here into the object container, we can make first a reference to the game manager because we're gonna use it more than once. So public game manager. We can assign it into an awake function. So awake game manager is equal to game manager instance. So here if game manager that dragging object is not null, and also if is full, it equals to false. we're gonna assign here into the game manager that current container will be equal to this that a game object. And when we are exiting that, we can call it null here. So let's try this. So game manager, I'm going over, we have an error here. What is that? Line 16, game manager dragging object. What is the error here? Object reference not set to an instance of an object. Object container trigger on trigger enter 2D. The game manager. It's supposed to be assigned here on awake. It's not assigned. Oh no, it's supposed to work. This is strange. Let's do it on start instead. Let's see if it's working better. Yeah, now it's working. It's probably because the game manager is not set up at awake. So now, yeah, if we are going into the game manager to look at the reference of the container, we can see that when we are dragging into a container, we can see the container that we are dragging in. So that's fine. Now to see the container that we're dragging in, we can go into the object container here, and at the same time we can have a reference to our image. So public image, let's say background image. Here we can right click on image and get the reference of Unity Engine UI. It's going to put it automatically on top here. So that's perfect. Now we need to go inside our game object container here, double click on it, and assign into the background image our image script. So just drag and drop it there. So yes, now what we need to do is take the background image and set it enabled to true. Same thing here, setting enable but to false instead. And you will see that when I press play and I'm dragging the plant over, you see that we see the container that is showing up, which is really cool. So now what we need to do is when we are when our mouse pointer is going up, we need to assign that plant to the container. So what we're gonna do here is on the object card, when the pointer is going up, we're gonna call the game manager. So you know what, we can do the same thing here. So private, let's say game manager, and let's go with a start function. Let's say game manager is equal to game manager that instance, and change those things here by the game manager. When we are using it more than twice, I think it's better to assign it properly, because it's going to take less memory and less CPU. Alright. So, on pointer up, what we're going to do here is triggering into the game manager the function that we made, which is place object. So here into the place object function, what we're gonna do is check if dragging object isn't equal to null, and also if current container isn't equal to null. If those two are true, what we're gonna do is instantiate first. To be able to instantiate the game object, we need to have onto the card, we need to assign into the card his object. Wait a second, we have the object card here, we have the object game here, so this is the one that we need to instantiate when we're dropping it there. So what we need to have here is into the plant drag, we need to have a reference to our container. So let's create a new script here. I'm gonna call it object dragging. So the object that we are dragging here need to have a reference into his card. So public game object, let's say card, and on the object card, when we are instantiating it here, we can assign get component card. Isn't it card? It's object dragging, sorry. Object dragging, that card will be equal to this that game object. Actually, you know why? You know what? Instead of a game object here, we can assign an object card. So on dragging here, instead of a game object, on object dragging, let's call it an object card. It will be just easier for us. So here we're gonna assign this because this is object card. So for me, I think it's better like that. So into the game manager here, now we can take the current object. So instantiate, take the current object, that get component, dragging, object dragging, we're taking the card, and we are taking also on the object card the object game. So yeah, you can also make it child of the current container, that transform. So also at the same time we need to tell to the current container that get component object container. Need to tell him that he is full, so his full is equal to true, as you can see here. So now, if I'm going to drag the small plant here, it's not working. That's probably because I'm deleting the reference before doing that. Object container, object card. Yes, I'm destroying before. So what I need to do here is doing first the function, and after that setting all the rest. Let's do this. Yes, Now you can see that the plant is there, and if we go into the scene and click on it, here is the plant game object. So if I'm trying to make another plant on top, we can see that it's not available because it's full. So now we can drag and drop plants on all the containers that we need to, like in the real game. So yeah, it's about it. It's about it for the first tutorial for the Plant vs Zombie tutorial. And yeah, I hope that you liked it, and don't hesitate to comment in the down below if you want to see more, and if you have some question, don't hesitate to also put it in the comments down below. So I hope to see you guys in the next tutorial. Ciao ciao.